Hello, everybody. I'm Bob Davis, and this is my weekly update on transport in the time of COVID-19, special edition, 5 months since lockdown. Okay, and there is something not good hanging over us at the moment, which you'll see in a minute. Don't forget to email me with your news, and you can also ask me for links, slides at this address, chairrdrf@aol.com. Okay, so this is lots of bits and pieces. This is what I picked up from what LCC, Simon Monk and the others have done based on the Kubler-Ross 5 stages of grief. It's a sort of piss take on what motorists are like when an LTN comes along. Shock, I may not be able to drive and park where I like. Denial, surely I have a right to do what I like. Frustration, why is this still progressing? Depression, I am locked in my own home. Then it goes upwards. Experiment, I might as well walk or get the bike out. Decision, actually that's a lot quicker and easier. And finally, integration, we need more walking and cycling routes. Okay. And there's some good news. Greta Thunberg is going back to school, and guess what her mode of transport is? Here's Mr. Helen from the Times again. On the roads of Britain's towns and cities, the moment of truth is next week. Drivers will encounter streets adapted for a green revolution in travel, and motorist groups, unquoted or unexamined, fear that pop-up cycle lanes, wider pavements and low traffic neighborhoods will cause serious congestion. So we have to fight, keep getting the message over. And there's Bart, who's got it up on the blackboard. And if Bart has to copy something out, it must be right. But we do have to keep on doing this, and that's a key theme of today's presentation. Carlton Reid, who you know, did a very nice thing. As you know, he has a weekly column in Forbes magazine, and he said, is there any motorist out there cut off by a new low traffic neighborhood scheme? I'd like to interview them. And he doesn't actually seem to have had anybody who's responded to his request. Why could that be? Right, now here's the bad news. Here's government figures. They are in a graph that the Bike Industry magazine did today, but I've just got them in the table form. Remember, cycling figures for England only. There's a lot of variability. The cycling figures are, in particular, they're not that accurate. Anyway, weekends are shaded in. So here's beginning of August, 17th was the latest date. And you can see here cars up to, compared with exactly last year, about 88%. Vans are at where they were, lorries where they were, all motor vehicles 91%, whereas rail is at 23%, tubes 30%, London buses 53%, buses outside 41%. Look at the cycling figures. Now the weekend ones are still quite big compared to last year, significantly up. But in the week, say, look at the last week we've got, they're at about 120, 130%. You know, about a quarter above where they were at this time last year. And, you know, okay, they're not that accurate, but overall, we can say cycling levels are not much higher than they were a year ago. And that means that if you can look at somewhere like London, where maybe they're about 25, 30% up, that means they're not likely to be significantly above where they were last year elsewhere. So we're not in a good place. We've had 5 months, and going back to school in England soon. Some more businesses will be opening up. After that, of course, we don't know. There may be mass unemployment in a couple of months. And then, of course, we have Brexit. So all kinds of stuff could be happening. We may have another lockdown. We don't know. Here's a quickie in Nottingham. It's good to see these signs seem to be getting out there. That's nice. But also in Nottingham, I found out from this guy Twitter feed that the Carlton Road scheme, which meant that Nottingham actually got more from the Emergency Active Travel Fund than they'd bid for, isn't actually doing what they said it would in terms of segregation, nor what the Department for Transport actually asked them for. So that may be happening elsewhere. If it is, not good news. Some local authorities are just messing about. They're not doing the radical road space reallocation. Here's Northamptonshire, which Family Bicycle have been complaining about a lot. Lost your driving confidence in lockdown. Do you want to improve your skills for free? Then you can have free driving skills around the Silverstone circuit, which is exactly the kind of confidence I don't think motorists need. And what are Northamptons doing in terms of giving people who want to ride bicycles confidence or infrastructure? Well, they're not, apparently. Bristol, they are giving up on the charging for the clean air zone. That's not good. And in Warwickshire, this is from Adam Tranter, we strongly encourage, that word again, pupils and families where possible and safe to either walk or cycle to school, because it's very good. But they didn't apply for any school streets under the Emergency Active Travel Fund, and none are in place. The same with Barnet, who didn't apply for any school streets. This is something from their, could be their early years leaflet. Getting to school safely. Good luck for your return to school in September. No bike lanes or anything. And it's interesting to look at the image of the bike here with stabilizers. You know, this is what they think cycling is. Now, I know there are some reception year, some nursery schools where kids will be turning up on bikes like this. It does happen, but it shows what they think cycling to school is. And for most kids, they will be beyond that kind of bicycle. I know there are issues about disability, but it shows that they are off. Oh yeah, don't forget the £27 billion road programme. Professor Goodwin's been doing some really good stuff on that. And with regard to the Highways England announcement that it's going to support 64,000 new jobs, 65,000, Phil Goodwin did some calculations, said this is around 1/5 of 1% of the UK labour force. By strange coincidence, it is close to the percentage of additional carbon as specified by Highways England, which they describe as insignificant. I told you last week that he'd done a cracker of a piece pointing out that a way they're justifying the road building program is that when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions from additional motor traffic, they look at it individual scheme by individual scheme, and of course it's only an additional element to the greenhouse gas emissions of about 0.2%. I also did some tweeting saying you could give, for that money, 64,000 people £422,000 each, which would be about the median wage over a dozen years, and ask them to do something socially useful instead. And there's been a bit more on how Highways England is stitching up this issue. Go to the BBC link there, and Transport Action Network are also on top of this one. you should keep abreast of that. Okay, delay. I'm lifting up my mug of tea while we get onto the delay. Delay is very much the theme of today. Still waiting Inspectorate Active Travel Commissioner, when schemes started, when they're completed. Also, RoadCC has reported, Simon McMichael, that just 50,000 of the planned 500,000 50 quid vouchers have been released, supposedly to avoid overwhelming retailers and mechanics signed up to the initiative. But trade sources were expressing concerns over when they would be paid. And so there are issues in getting bikes mended and looked at in time for returning to work. What's been happening where you are is very, just about to. 5 months. I mean, that is a hell of a lot of time. And I did a thread on this, which I'll just briefly go through. You can read it yourself. I've been pointing out how little has been done to support walking and cycling, and where good things have been done, these measures will be under threat. As you know, there is constant fight back over low traffic neighborhoods. And you have to remember that the attacks, the backlash, often without the lash in the first place, are in defense of excessive driver privilege. Now, there are problems with low traffic neighborhoods, but they need to be tackled by other measures like law enforcement, driver charging, car parking restrictions, and/or extensions of the low traffic neighborhood. So we need to keep hammering away on this. We need a well-informed body of transport professionals and campaigners who are well armed with the evidence and the ability to patiently explain the facts. And that's you lot. And that's why you need to come on Ideas with Beers, to be well informed and to defend what has been done. Just a brief reference to diversity page. I haven't picked up anything new this last week. So let's look at what's happened on the ground. As usual, it all depends where you live. So I did this last week looking at St Mary Road, Kettering, and I thought it had looked quite good. And Northants do put it up on their Twitter feed, but Family Bicycle have cycled over it, and they said when looked at in context, it isn't that good because it runs out where you need it, doesn't treat the junctions properly, isn't there in the right places where it should be, etc., etc. And every scheme needs to be like that. You can't just stick out photographs with cones and wands and cylinders on them. You need to do a proper reallocation of road space. And a lot of places that isn't happening. So this South Tyneside, cyclists, please dismount. I mean, what the bloody hell is that? There isn't even anything special for them to dismount from, as I understand it. Again, usual rider, if I'm wrong, I don't live in the area, do let me know where I've got it wrong. Leicester's done a lot of good stuff, mile a week, but there are problems with some of the pop-up cycle lanes. Do go to Russian Kiwis feed. He pointed out there's a problem. Someone else pointed out that there is a tendency in Leicester to do what I remarked on a few weeks ago, and that is to have lanes that are too narrow in the first place. This was constructive criticism, saying they're pretty good in some places, but they need to be beefed up in others. Edinburgh, yes, made the front page there. And here's some complaints from Councillor Arthur about what he calls the floating bus stop on George IV Bridge. It isn't actually a floating bus stop. If it was, the bus stop would be there. go to his thread there, there was some debate, which was actually, I thought was actually rather well-mannered and pointing out some genuine possible concerns, and other people saying how it could be treated properly so the actual threat was minimized. Edinburgh Living Streets have said they don't want it, and so there's a bit of aggravation going on. Hopefully the kind of willingness to sort of talk through things properly will win out, and the right kind of arrangement will go in. You can talk about how it could be different. Now, this is sent to me from Stephen in Bristol. Treatment of Minna Road used to have a lot of abandoned camper vans and whatever on it, replaced by odd bits and pieces to keep the cars out by the local activists, and then barriers. And now we've got a cycle lane with sort of white wand cylinders, whatever you want to call them. So that's, I think, a bit of good news. London, my home turf. Here's Casper Hughes, who did a presentation here a few weeks back. That's Casper there. Extinction Rebellion, Regent's Park branch, closed the gates. Protest against the Crown Estate Paving Commission. Now, low traffic neighbourhoods in London. In case you haven't, do the must read from Ranty Highwellman there. Now, this has been going around in Islington. Ludicrous road closures, claiming roads are actually being closed only to motor vehicles, exacerbated vehicle pollution, no evidence, consultation instead of consultation. Yeah, well up for that as a trial. Money-making land grab. I'm not sure how it's a money-making land grab. It's not a dangerous roadblock. Disabled and vulnerable will have benefits. Local businesses should be better off, blah, blah, blah. So this is a thing that's going on, and there needs to be fight back against it. Don't forget that quote from Phil Goodwin from his tweet, which I brought up last week. And there's this Councillor Joshua Lindsay in Lambeth. He's been very good before. I mentioned with this tweet about the issues of inequality, effects of motor traffic on Black and minority ethnic people. He did another thread today here, which you should look at. Come back to Mark Treasure's point about Schrödinger's residential street, a street that simultaneously has no motor traffic on it, so it doesn't need to be filtered, and also has lots of motor traffic on it that will cause problems if displaced onto a main road. And just another cyclist backs that up. Roads, with his version, roads are very quiet now, we don't need an LTN, and roads are very busy, so we can't have an LTN. There's the pushback in Wandsworth, which Joe Earlsfield talked about last week. And I just got this was my reading of Simon Monk's advice. Don't give a noisy minority too much importance, because that's not good. Explain to councillors just how good the measure or scheme will be for them, their reputation, their legacy. And don't forget to engage with actual and potential supporters regularly, persistently, and be encouraging. Right, now Tower Hamlets have taken out the temporary closure of Skew Bridge on Old Ford Road. That was one of the first ones that we pointed about going in, and they're saying it was due to happen And Councillor Kevin Brady says the bridge was always due to reopen once the traffic levels started to build up. I don't know, was that the case? Did anybody say anything about that? A closure will still be considered as part of a livable street scheme, which would manage the entirety of the area holistically. That sounds a bit like we're not going to do anything temporary because we want to do something permanent, but you end up not doing anything. So, but I don't know, you know, up to people in town hamlets to fight. Okay, now in Brent, 2 low traffic neighbourhoods went up in these 2 areas, Alston Stonebridge and Wembley Central. 7 more due to go in by the end of September. This is from Sylvia Gotoro. Officers said they had lots of interest in inquiry, and so far seems to have gone down well. 30 school streets, all the consultations are up, etc. And there is one of the low traffic neighbourhoods. Looks kind of okay, could be more friendly signing, but looks okay. However, what's happened so far was that the barriers are removed when it comes to the evening. Who by, we don't know. And David Arditi photographed that and said that plenty of motors are going through. That was on Thursday. Sylvia suggests this may be a prelude to lockable bollards going in, which one must hope for. But there's no point having it blocked off during the day and just opened up again a bit later. Okay, now it just shows this from Greenwich. Some nice messaging here. They're just using the nice sign. They're saying all homes are accessible by car, emergency vehicles have access, but drivers can't use these streets as a through route. So that's a kind of nice, easy to understand, friendly message. And I've chosen Hackney as well for that. They talk about the new neighborhoods that are going in, and they have a site where they say you can have your say. So it's all nice and clear. What they do is they have, this is for the London Fields low traffic neighbourhood due to start September the 7th. They have a map, schools with proposed school streets there and there and there. Traffic filters, new ones here, 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 here. Nice symbol, nice green leaf. New bus gate, existing bus gate. Motor vehicle and entry and exit points with nice arrows showing them, and explaining what they're about. So there's a nice bit of messaging for the low London Fields LTN, and 2 of them, Hackney Downs and Hoxton West, were due in yesterday. Also with nice messaging. This is from the activists in Enfield for the Bowes low traffic neighbourhood, which has had on-street protests. Mythbuster leaflet, 2 sides. And I think, you know, just read through that. I think that's an absolute excellent one for activists to get around. Email them at lowtrafficbg@gmail.com and you can get copies of this leaflet. Hounslows from last week, temporary cycle lane going in. Ealing, now a bit of an Ealing special, planning 8 more LTNs, some already in, more 1 protected cycle lanes and about 12 school streets. A couple of roads have been closed, no access to Windmill Road except cycles. Okay, short 1 protected mandatory cycle lane to improve cycle priority between Hanwell Busgate and Hanwell Bridge. Note extra long gap between ones for cyclists who avoided the bus gate to enter the cycle lane coming in there. And also the westbound cycle lane, which used to be an advisory cycle lane. This is quite well illustrated. You can see the old ACL here. I like that very much about Ealing. They've given that extra bit here with their new pop-up cycle lanes, and a bit of discussion about how they're changing the cylinders. Colin reports that in Ealing, a lot of the cylinders are being knocked about. Havering, yes. However bad things are, they're always worse in Havering. They got 50k from the first tranche for signing and stenciling in town centres, no cycle lanes. And they've made submission under tranche 2 for school streets with supporting measures like bicycle helmets. You know, it's anybody who's going to advocate bicycle helmets is going to be someone who's not putting in the infrastructure or even doing other things properly. And there's a bit of a protest with a few councillors in support riding around in Havering, and that's your protest there. Okay, so one of my favorite sites, and this is where you have a special chance of seeing yours truly cycling on pop-up infrastructure. So I've been pointing out how they'd started doing it, but it was taking a bit of time to come in. They hadn't treated these junctions yet. And now there's yours truly, and you can see the kind of treatment they were doing at some of the junctions there. That's now more continuous, should be finished off about now. And here's a chance to look at what they've been doing with bus stops. So this is going westbound the other direction. And my friends there saying, well, a bit worried about pedestrians, but I would have personally thought people couldn't complain about that. Got your blisters in there, zebra crossing, signage there. I would have thought that would be perfectly okay for pedestrians. And so you've got a two-way pop-up on Prince of Wales Road. Other stuff's been going on in Camden. Now, Sylvia counts on school streets 483 extra school streets to be implemented in London based on Laura Laker's summary of allocations. Don't forget, there are over 3,000 schools in London. We don't know what those 483 are going to be like. Some of them could be in name only. Others could be more solid and indicative of changes in the overall area. Do try and attend this webinar if you're interested in school streets on this Thursday in 2 days' time. We're going to have my old pal, Professor Adrian Davis, the first and only Professor of Transport and Health at Napier University, about some research they've done showing that school streets are good. And Sylvia will be there doing a similar presentation to one she did here. We also got Sustrans talking about their national program. So that's good for you to get informed on Thursday. And back to Royal Parks, a demonstration on Saturday, the 12th of September to have restrictions on motor traffic and protesting against the Crown Estate Paving Commission. It's the wonderful Superintendent Andy Cox, who's moving to Lincolnshire in September, does this tweet. I need your help. Please tell at least 10 people about the London Road Safety Public Reporting System of Traffic Offences. That's third-party reporting, dash cams, head cams, light cams, cycle cams. Spread the word and be part of the solution. That's good. Don't forget, I always say each week, support your local roads and traffic police if they're doing the right thing. Ask them to be like the Met. Be supportive when they do good stuff. Indicate that you're thankful. On to the reading list. This is a key one, Ranty Highwoman's read. Decarbonizing rural transport. That's a new read. Do have a look at that. LCC's regular stuff, banning SUV ads mentioned last week, along with a video of Callum of LCC going around London. 2 reports from Transport for Quality of Life, Transport Action Network, and Brian's Low Traffic Neighborhood, how to do LTN community engagements. Phil Goodwin on how climate change is ignored in roads building decisions. There's a new piece on navigation apps, Waze, Google Maps, etc., and how they make life hard for us, how they make everything, low traffic neighborhoods, everything bad news. It's an American piece, but relevant here. And your consultations, transport decarbonization, don't forget, I think that might have been finished, roads policing, the highway code review consultation document, spending review, we've got time to do. There's a new one here on coroners. Our friends in Road Peace have been asking us to mention this because there've always been issues about what coroners say after road crash deaths, and responding to the government consultation on planning for the future. And finally, oh yeah, this London Traffic Watch one, which is a bit of Mickey Mouse thing. Finally, some signing there. I do believe that that was photoshopped. I don't think that that would have been allowed by local authorities, but it does remind you to get some nice signage in the green ones are nicer than just saying road closed. And that's it.
So what we're talking about is how well are my council doing? Because if you remember, I'll get to the future at the end, but if you remember, part of the announcements in Gear Change is about an assessment of council performance on cycling. And Brian's asked me and Ken to speak because as Edwin Burke and apparently somebody else also said, there's a bit of a dispute about this, but those who don't know history are destined to repeat it. And it's quite important to think about how we've done this sort of thing in the past. Some of us, and there are a couple of others, I see Tim's on the call, Tim Phoebe, and Steve Essex as well, we've been part of doing this in the past, some years ago. And we're going to be talking about 2 particular methodologies that have been used. One, it was the English Region Cycling Development Team, ERCDT, which Ken will talk about. And then there's BIPAD, which I now see as 20 years old, which is a EU system of auditing councils. So if we switch over to Ken, sorry about the siren going on in the background. Ken, over to you, and I'll do tell me when to do the slides and I'll change them. There's the picture of us from 20 years ago at the bottom, by the way. You can spot spot how well some of us have aged. Patrick Lingwood's there as well, for those of you who know Patrick.
Yeah. Oh, hi there. Right, the ERCDT, as Mark has named a few people who were in the ERCDT, the English Region Cycling Development Team, was set up to try and sort of rush along the National Cycling Strategy. It was set up by the National Cycling Strategy Board, funded by the DFT, and the contract was won by AEA Technology, who employed a bunch of us. They employed 10 regional coordinators in the 9 English regions, and also 1 for London, and 3 national advisors, of which I was one on cycle training and road safety, Paul Rosen on promotion marketing, and Alex Sully on infrastructure. And Mark's pointing them out as we go along. And we also had a lot of other advisors and management from AEA Technology. And one of the things that we had to do was to assess all the English highway authorities on their cycling delivery. So you can go to the next one. This was 2003. We were set up in 2002, but the first assessment we could do was in 2003. So we did this assessment on 10 criteria. The local transport plan, cycling strategy, still sort of around. Annual progress reports, which was what people had to report on how they progressed on their 5-year local transport plan. Council commitment to cycling, cycling infrastructure, what they were putting in now, what they already had. Cyclist training, my own personal one. Marketing and promotion, polls. One, stakeholder engagement, how they engaged with people or the public, more or less. Wider engagement, which was more about how they engaged with other bodies like the police, emergency services, travel planning, and all that sort of thing, and transport, bus providers and so on, public transport. Planning for cycling, development gain, all that. And finally, targets and monitoring, whether local authorities had decent targets and whether they were able to actually monitor whether they were achieving those targets, whether they had decent monitoring of cycling and other things. You can move to the next one, Mark. So we set out and we scored every authority on each of these criteria on a scale of 0 to 5 bicycle bells. And dear old Brick cartoonist drew us up a bicycle bell for our publicity. And so, you know, you could go from 0 bells, which was nothing on each of the criteria, to 5 bells, which was the absolute, if you were in Holland or wherever. And so if you can read through this. You can go to the next part. Yeah. Wait. So in 2003, we did the assessment ourselves. Our regional coordinators, each of those were responsible for the authorities within their region, which went from, for Brian Dalton in London, he had 33 London boroughs to deal with, to I think the lowest was 6 we had in one of the regions. Which, so it's you know, it wasn't it. And they each had to carry out a similar review.
I had 6. Yeah.
You had 6. Oh, you were a lazy bugger, Mark Strong, weren't you? Yeah. So Mark had the easy one. So probably could go into more detail. And then there were the 3 national advisors, myself, Alex, and Paul, who were the moderators who sort of checked that the feedback we're getting, we're trying to get some consistency between the setup. I would say that the process was developing as we were doing it. So it wasn't quite ideal, and we'll come to that again later. But by 2004, we had a pretty robust process. And so we've done the first review. I can tell you a little bit about what came up from that. So you could get a local authority on those 10 criteria. You could score up to 50 bells. The highest we got was 39, which was York, which was very good at that time. No surprise, seeing as Tim and I had both come from York, so there might be a little bit of bias in there. But the lowest was 6 bells in the English regions, and similarly within London. I'm not going to say which authorities scored the lowest, although the one in London is perhaps best known for its prefix of bad. No hints, it's already been mentioned today. And Brian would be very pleased that Camden was joint top London authority. I shan't tell you which the other one was. And but the average bell score for authorities was 19 out of 50, roughly. That was slightly lower in London, with just about 18.5, and slightly over 19 for the others, but that would average out over 150 odd authorities at 19. So no surprise, authorities were delivering for cycling slightly less than average, shall we say, which wasn't a huge surprise to us and shouldn't have been any surprise to the authorities, although it did seem to be that way in the way that some of them responded. So I would say that in 2003, when the assessments began, when it was an in-house assessment, very much it was a new thing for the authorities that we were working with. And so it was a little bit of a wake-up call for them. But by 2004, we had a very clear process put together, and we changed for the 2004. We didn't do a complete assessment again. What we did was a progress review, and we sent out the process by which we had come to the scores, and sent that out to councils in a document, which you can whisk to the next slide, Mark. Yeah, this is the sort of screen grab of the front page of the progress review guidance and matrices for assessment. So for each of the 10 criteria, we give them clear guidance, and this is how we came to the scores. Their matrices, and then they had to send back this form, which they would put in the evidence to say whether they should have a change in their Bell score. So the current Bell score would be put down. They'd say, we would like to have this score, and then we would moderate it depending on the evidence, or we'd ask for more evidence. Don't go too fast, Mark.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, you can go on to it now. Okay, and this is the sort of thing that was in the criteria. So you would have, this isn't the whole matrix for council commitment, but it's a good idea for what it is. I'm a bit biased in as I basically coordinated the production of this document, this guidance, and I think it stands the test of time, and it's something I think we should probably try and make available for people if they want to have a look at. It would need considerable updating, but in terms of the basics of what a local authority should be doing for cycling, it really covers all the bases. Some of the details, some of the infrastructure, some of the stuff which we would be doing would need serious updating, but on the basis of the ideas and ground covered, it really covers the ground properly. So this gives you sort of an idea of how you would score. So you can move on to the next one, Mark. So what did we achieve? We were only there for less than 3 years, really, as the ERCDT, but it made a difference. I would say that we had a response in all the councils, obviously, that we dealt with. For those who engaged in the process, there was a negative response. We scored people low because they were bad. Some of them really didn't like it and shouted and shouted and shouted. And unfortunately, they got more attention as usual than the ones who thought, actually, it's pretty good. It gives us a way to say we're not doing well enough. For cycling officers who didn't take it personally, that it was a personal affront on them that they hadn't got a high score. They said, this is exactly what we need to take to our senior officers and tell them, yeah, we need more resources. We need to do things differently. Please help us by scoring us low. And it also meant if you scored low, you had more potential to increase when you started to do things. And what we noticed is that in the first year, the first assessment, we were talking to cycling officers. The second assessment, we were also talking to assistant director level, senior officer level, much more involved, engaged in the process and so on. And as I've said, the process that we came up with was in the end really, really good. We had, for the progress review, we had an awards ceremony for the councils which had made the most progress between 2003 and 2004. And as it says here, we really got some councils talking about cycling and taking it seriously. From my own perspective, it accelerated the introduction of bikeability. I was put in a position where I could push things forward much more quickly. And it was really the impetus for the creation of Cycling England, which would appear is going to come back in some format. So that's what was most of the good things. You move to the next slide. The lessons. It would have really helped us, and it would have reduced the negative feedback if we had if we'd sort of done what we did in year 2, in year 1. If we'd been able to do that, if we'd been able to work with the authorities and say, look, this is the process, this is the evidence, this is where you stand, and it would have been not quite so sort of out of the blue that they got scores that were low. They would have been able to see quite clearly that yes, we do. That's where we fit within this. And also there was a little bit of with the auditors. I think most of the auditors that we had, the regional coordinators, had come from authorities that they were auditing, which on the whole wasn't a problem. I think it was with one of the regional coordinators, particularly, who seemed to think that his authority should score the highest of anybody's, regardless of how good they were or how bad. But I think in terms of the objectivity of the audit, it would be better if we had been auditing authorities that we hadn't worked with previously or had been employed with. So there was a possibility of inconsistency there. But if we had, also we were learning as we're going along in the first year. The regional coordinators were learning how to do it, so it may not have been consistent as it was when we had a much more clear process, written down guidance and so on. So involving the council was really good, doing that from the outset. But I think overall, the worst thing of it was that the plug was pulled when we were really starting to make a difference, when we were talking to the senior officers, when we were getting on the things starting to happen, and then suddenly the plug was pulled because the DFT just basically didn't like to have negative feedback from something. And I think that's pretty normal with what happens with DFT projects and so on. So what we really need in the future is DFT ministers to be robust and support the programs that they have put in place.
I think there's lots of questions on the chat, and I'll try and answer them. First of all, very much important to deal with Roxanne's point. Yes, we were a very undiverse bunch, and it was noted at the time.
Yeah.
And we were all appointed, we all individually, the parent company AEA2, who had the contract, individually recruited us. So in a sense, you know, hold our hands up to we all be part of the part of the problem, but part of the problem probably was from the DFT to not specify that diversity and inclusivity should be part of the issue in the first place. So, you know, it's rot starts at the top, and we were responding at the time. It was 20 years ago. Things I would hope would be a lot better these days, and it would certainly be part of the brief to look at, if not part of the team. And one would hope that would come out of the, you know, fall out of it. There'd be a positive inclusivity role in there, but there was, you know, it was what it was, and that's who we were. It must have been very difficult for Sally in particular. So some of the other things, yes, it was funded by the government. The National Cycling Strategy was a government body. It was an arm's length organisation of the Department for Transport. And we had this possibly naive expectation that when we went to local authorities and said, you're doing really shit, they would go, oh gosh, that's a terrible surprise to us. How can we do better? Instead of the reaction being, as Ken said, no, we're not. How dare you accuse us of that? We're going to the government. And remember, it was a Labour authority, Labour government at the time. We're a big Labour authority. How dare you accuse us of doing badly? And we, as the messengers, got shot because the councils didn't want to hear that message. So that's, you know, that is the essence of what happened. And I'll come back to that at the end. So just moving on, Roger has actually done a spoiler. Roger Stockey said, what about BIPAD? Well, BIPAD is another audit process, which is an EU-wide one. So it stands for Bicycle Policy Audit. And here you can see the evolution of BIPAD over the last 20-odd years. It's quite a Central European focused. At one point, it was a mandatory requirement for German and Austrian, any German and Austrian city that was receiving any government funding for cycling had to do a BIPAD audit. So not surprisingly, it was very heavily focused on those countries. And if you look at the map, you can see heavy focus in here. There are 9 modules in BIPAD. It's very similar. And it was the BIPAD Spiral of Success, I think it's called. This thing that looks like an old-fashioned telephone dial here. And you went round from needs, leadership, policy. So very similar approach to the RCDT approach: means and personnel, infrastructure and safety, information, education, promotion and partnerships, complementary actions, back to evaluation, and you start again. There's a dynamic process. By the way, I will just point out that in the infrastructure, both here in BIPAD and in the SDT approach, we weren't looking at what was delivered. We weren't looking at the quality of the infrastructure. We were looking at the process by which infrastructure was delivered. This is very much a process issue. We weren't measuring widths of cycle lanes, but how did the width come to be substandard, for example? Why didn't an authority pick that up? One of the things BIPAD does is it divides up the scores into these 4 levels. So it classifies, so rather than having a score saying 19 out of 50, you get banded into this. Your authority, are you an ad hoc approach orientated authority? Do you have isolated good things? Is your system-orientated approach, or is your wholehearted integration of cycling into the authority performance? And not surprisingly, most of the UK ones came out right at the bottom. So the 250 BiPAD projects to date, it's just been relaunched last year, by the way, over 25 countries, and 5.5 in the UK, and I'll come back to why the half in a minute. And very sparsely distributed for various reasons. You have to be an accredited BiPAD auditor. At one point we were, Alex and Rob, my colleagues, were the only accredited BiPAD auditors in the UK, and there was another, Damien, in Ireland. Birmingham was the first, then Liverpool. Then strangely enough, some guy in Southwark commissioned it twice. I don't know where he's got to these days. That's Roger, by the way, in case people don't realise. Oh, Roger was accredited, he tells me, apologies. Brighton and Hove was 2010, and then Croydon wanted to revive it in 2018, and we effectively anglicised it, or UKified it, and rewrote it and updated and called it SciPad, partly, I think Kevin's on the call here, partly in reaction to trying to get rid of bike and replace it with cycle to be more inclusive, and also trying to look at a slightly different version of it. But it was never finished. Croydon started the process and it was never completed. So the SciPad version, which is here, is very similar to the issues that that we worked on in ECDT, except it was 9 criteria. We took training out of the criteria because we put it in with information and education. It was part of a wider whole training, and it wasn't a thing on its own. And future proofing was an issue about development, staff development and training. We thought that was quite important. So the lessons was the way it was done is we had a workshop with the user groups. So that was members, officers and stakeholders. And we explained to people what they were going to be self-assessed on. Then they did the self-assessment. And then they fed back. And then the idea would be there would be another workshop. And the problem we found with Croydon was that there was insufficient time and resources for officers, and the insufficient possibly commitment from members. And that's sort of not unfair because they're busy, but they didn't have time. We could never manage to have time to come back and have the follow-up workshop to actually sign off the process. So all the integration was done, all the investigations were done, but there was never the final process to actually do these things. So you need to have, the importance is you need to have a commitment to actually do the thing, and it needs to be seen as proper. Now in both cases, I'll move on to gear change. So this is the current proposal from Active Travel England. Now I've got no idea, some people might know, I've got no idea who at the DFT is developing this. I do hope that we are able to talk to them and they could learn some lessons, because one of the things is that we weren't Ofsted. We weren't an Ofsted authority. Here we have the government actually saying we want to play a similar role to the Ofsted. We had councils saying you're not the Audit Commission, so we don't have to cooperate with you if we don't want to. So this new body is going to have some teeth, and is going to be able to have to say, no, you need to cooperate with us, and if you don't cooperate with us, this is what's going to happen to you. Otherwise, the only ones who cooperate are the ones that either don't care or are actually really good and have got nothing to fear, which are going to be very limited. The ones in the middle are just going to not want to play ball. So trying to get the ones that really need to develop, and this, it's about mindfulness and self-awareness. If they don't think they need to improve, they're not going to want to cooperate with the thing which says they need to improve because they don't think they need to. So I think that's going to be an issue which hasn't really been, I mean, this is all I know about what they're doing. So, this is all that most of us know about what they're doing. Active Travel England's assessment of an authority's performance with respect to sustainable travel outcomes will be taken into account. So they'll be wise to cooperate, but at some point there will have to be an example made of an authority who isn't cooperating. And that will be interesting to see how this team and whoever runs this team, be it Andrew Gilligan or anyone else, actually reacts to that, because I'm sure the same things will happen, that authorities, in this case it will presumably be large conservative shire counties who feel that they are unfairly targeted for doing badly. They will equally run to their supporters and colleagues and say, that's unfair, why are we having our funding cut for our bypass when our bypass has nothing to do with cycling? So it will be interesting to see, first of all, how they establish this organisation, how they train this organisation, given massive changes, obviously, in the last 20 years with technology, you know, a lot more of it could be done online, a lot more of it could be done in Zoom conferences and so on, but there will also need to be some on the spot investigations. So it's going to be very interesting, and who knows how it'll develop, but certainly, back to the first comment I made, if they don't learn from the history of how it was done before, then there will be similar errors and similar issues repeated. And one of the things we're hoping, and one of the reasons why we're talking now, is to see if we can hopefully subvert some of those and stop them being made again. And I think we'll stop talking there and wait for some questions.
Yeah, now what I thought I'd share was, well, one, like how I attempted to make a UK version of the Dutch balance approach, which is very much the sort of stuff that Ken and Mark have been talking about. But like all good ideas I ever have, I steal them from the Dutch and then try to cram it into the UK setting. So I had a go when I was writing the London Cycling Design Standards to do a kind of UK version of the Feats balance. Very much had the same fate as kind of Mark, people went, no, this is too critical. What the hell's going on? Well, I thought I'd pick some of these things up there. So people who are into infrastructure in Holland will recognise the kind of famous Dutch 5, the direct, comfortable, attractive, safe. But there's also these other things that are just as important to the cycling infrastructure and the take up and the culture, and that's, you know, what's the existing policy like, what's the bicycle use, how competitive is it compared to a car. You might notice a lot of these things if you look at the cycling level of service that I was trying to put in there. But I thought I'd just show some quickly how I was thinking of using these. I was trying to get a policy score, and I was just trying to do like a quick, like very much like the two sheets that you've just been shown, but like a kind of simple version. Did he train the staff in there? Like you can try and do cycle infrastructure in a town, but it's kind of like the Stevenage question. If they've got free car parking everywhere, nobody's going to do it. So that's really going to affect your uptake. So I attempted to do a kind of score for the policy. I also did a kind of user satisfaction and intention using the theory of planned behavior bit, and I was trying to reference back to Ornstein's ladder as well, and the sign points for how well you were consulting with people. All this stuff that people at TfL want to, this is too much, Brian, but still it's very important, I think, that we go through this. I also had as a critical, I brought it in, nobody let me, and it only really stayed in my head, but I thought I'd mention it now. The impact on pedestrians, I made that an absolute critical thing in the balance system. Ooh, I know what I'm showing now. I thought I'd show some of the potential outputs. I did like a sort of generic layouts as well for how if we use this balance system. So imagine like the directness, safety, comfort, coherence, attractive, that's all fed from the cycling level of service. So if you've looked and you're really getting into the spreadsheets after our talk, have a look through that. It tells you all the stuff that affects the infrastructure, but also fed in with the user satisfaction, pedestrian impact, what the local policy was like, to kind of give an overall picture. And just to point out a few things here on the superhighways, the way I was thinking about them in 2014 anyway, yeah, they had to be direct, but you didn't necessarily have to have good local policies, because you're just kind of bulldozing your way through there, and it's kind of led by the TfL team. Whereas on like the mini Hollands, they might necessarily have to be as direct, but your policy better be good, because you're going to have to become a mini Holland borough, which is something that Waltham Forest did in there. So I was looking when I assessed all the different areas to make sure that you kind of fitted to these profiles, and it was quite useful. But not all minds are like mine and Mark's and Ken's, I will say. I did one for the Central London grid there as well, and I had a kind of quiet way one as well. So make of those what you will. But what I thought I really wanted to show is the way I do things these days. So rather than actually assess it myself, I go around local authorities, and I did this across all the districts in Manchester and wherever I go really. I say, here's the kind of best practice in 12 areas. How do you cope? So I think this is more fun for the last 5-10 minutes here. If I go through each one of these 12 steps and you think about your local area, and you think about how well you're doing, so it's really like how prepared are you to actually support active travel in your area. So let's have a look on this. So what's the first step you need? Always like completely important. And at this stage, I've kind of put in national, regional and local best practice. So really, I'd suggest everybody who's watching this, think about the local and how you fit. These happy smiley faces or miserable faces are kind of supposed to say how well we're doing Yeah, at the national stage, obviously we've got Boris saying golden age of cycling. Woo! You got London there showing the best example. London's a byword for cycling around the world. Can't get much more bought in than that. And obviously we've got the man himself, Clyde Lokes, looking a bit younger there. Hope you don't mind me showing this one. You know, that they're setting out to make a safe and nice place to live. And they are actually doing that. So how do you score when it comes to like local political buying? Because you won't get anywhere unless your councillors and your politicians are actually bought into this. And I know lots of people on this call will have the scars of that. Check it out anyway. Have you got some kind of strategic walking and cycle network? Yeah, at national level, we got a printed cycle tool, and we're hoping some kind of walking stuff comes through. At the kind of regional level, that's the London Strategic Cycle Network, and at local levels, we've got the LC whips. Have you got an LC whip in your area? You're not even started the game unless you've got one of those going in there. So yeah, well, we're looking pretty good. Looking pretty good so far. The kind of local network planning that I kind of concentrate on with people like, okay, you've got a strategic corridor. What about all the low traffic neighborhoods around it? How you're talking about that? I've shown a little bit from the new LTN 0120, sorry, with the mesh density analysis. That's quite a good system to use if you're really into it. I'm saying this all very fast. You might have to watch this in slow-mo or read all the tons of material on it. In the central, the kind of regional one, there's the B network in Manchester, pretty good practice. And that kind of local is that kind of porosity analysis that I do, like how does each low traffic neighborhood react with the other ones? Where do you place the crossings to open up cells? So you can have a kind of area-wide view. And that was the one that I covered in the video that I put on YouTube in Harpenden. All right, so we're looking pretty good. But have you even started any of these in your area? Think about that. Stakeholder engagement. You see, at kind of national level, we do it pretty well as a consultation going on the highway code. Make sure you get your comments in. At kind of regional level, there's the B network comments and lots of commonplace stuff going on now. So people are engaging fairly well, and the social media platforms make this pretty good. How are you doing it? At a kind of local level, I still feel it's a little bit poor. You get some people that walk out and do like street audits, but there's not a lot of it. There's a picture, because we're doing lots of history today, from me in 2014 on the cycle route inspection meeting. Lots of people on this call kind of remember those. Well, let's bring them back. Let's go out and look at these things together and come up with ideas rather than waiting to see what the local authority cooks up. So bit of a sad face all round. Not many people are being as collaborative as they like them to be at the kind of local level. Number 5, yeah, so some kind of prioritized delivery. So you can come up with stuff and you can just wait for opportunistic plans to come along or developments to take place that you can fleece some money from, or you can have some kind of overall prioritized plan. So gear change has come in there. We see that the government's committed and there's money there, and we're getting the lists of like the local authorities and what they've been allocated. Hopefully that'll grow and grow and grow. There's a kind of regional one in London there of the list of everybody doing the active travel fund stuff, and the kind of local one I've shown a bit of the Manchester stuff as well, of everything that's getting built. In this case, that's around Wigan. You can see Wigan, and this is the next like 18 months of all the stuff that they're going to build across Wigan. Quite an impressive selection of stuff there. Wigan are the one to watch. You heard it here first. Like a design, what kind of design standards are you working to? You could have the money, you could know where it goes, but you might build something utterly terrible if you don't have good design standards. Great, we've got a happy, smiling face kind of nationally. There's a few things that make me wrinkle my nose up, but it's still pretty damn good to use the cycling stuff. And we kind of need a similar walking one. Get to that later. I shown a good regional one. I had to show the Leicester one there because that's pretty fresh and some good stuff in there. You don't necessarily always have to look at the London stuff to get ideas. And the kind of local, there's a best practice one like Waltham Forest, who took lots of the stuff that we put in the London Cycling Design Standards, made it relevant for their streets and their people and their communities. So all good there. What are you working to? Are you still working to DP 32? Whatever. Anyway, quality audits, that's been the theme of the day, and it's quite important as well. So we've got good national cycle ones. We still need a national walking one. We haven't got, but the cycling level of service tool coming out at national level is a game-changing moment as far as I'm concerned. I couldn't be happier that that's out there. It's a little bit watered down in places. Yeah, a kind of regional level Healthy Street Check in London's pretty good because it's got the walking and it's got the cycling stuff. In Manchester, we've got an even better version that does walking, cycling, and we do place making as well as part of our our quality audit assessments. And that kind of local level, it's the street audits, the road safety audits, all those things are in place now. What are you using to audit your stuff in your area? Have a little think. Behavior change, marketing, comms, all lumped together because, you know, that's what I do. I'm an engineer. I just lump it all into one field and one point that could go on forever. At kind of national level, yeah, we've got the saying great things like reallocating road space, reducing cars. It's all looking pretty good, and you've got the greatest marketing material we've got in Boris there on his bike. At a regional level, we've got people like Chris Boardman. We've also got some really good like comms on the TFGM website with ordinary people saying what they'll do to walk and cycle. That kind of local areas where you can pass messages on through Commonplace and other platforms. Looking pretty good what you're doing in that area. Delivery indeed. This is kind of what we're all judged on, what I'm judged on, how much we actually get built so actual users can use it. So at a national level, yeah, just see Bob's delay slide. You know, stuff, and the money's getting there. It's nowhere near the money that's been spent on motorways and all the rest of the things, but there is money there. But where's the delivery? We're still waiting on it. At a kind of regional level, I'll put a happiness on the delivery, although it's unfunded, the B network in Greater Manchester. But we are starting to actually finally crack on. And there's a local one, a Cyclops in Manchester, with the Daily Mail covering a cycling protected junction that works for walking and cycling. Never in my born days. Things are changing out there. What's your delivery like? Okay, the wayfinding side of things are also important. You don't want people to get lost in there. I kind of think the national guidance is a little bit weak, not really best practice, nowhere near cut up with the level that the Dutch and the Belgians are at. At a kind of regional level, we have just completely copied the Dutch system. There's one to talk about another day, what canoe punting is, but that's the kind of approach that we're taking in Greater Manchester. We'll get those signs out. And at a kind of local level, people are still doing kind of old school stuff. When we were researching the quiet ways, people were saying when they saw those blue signs for cyclists, they thought they were for professional cyclists. It wasn't that enticing to new people. So I still think there's work to be done. I think there's lessons that we've learned that we're not applying nationally or locally. Okay, the monitoring side of things, look, pretty good. You got pretty good national walking and cycling statistics out there. Not amazing. At a regional level, like the Cinnamon model in London is just like the best in the world for monitoring cycling. I don't think anybody could argue with that. But where's the walking version?
That's not monitoring. That's planning. Monitoring is looking at numbers and data. Anyway, sorry.
Cinnamon tells you exactly how many cyclists are on every street and what happens as a result. Doesn't it?
No,
Yeah.
it tells you. It estimates how many there are. Not models how many there are. It doesn't tell you how many there are for real. Anyway, sorry to butt in.
It does. Well, okay, we're getting into it. Me and Mark will have an arm wrestle about this tonight because I know that it picks up points, but it does an algorithm to kind of do estimates, but it's based on a real data source. But anyway, you're losing up the last of my 2 minutes of data. But yeah, so obviously this is tomorrow. And at the kind of local level, we've got some good walking and cycling stats coming out of Waltham Forest. Most people don't monitor walking at all, cycling barely. It's got to happen. Maintenance has got to be right. I think it's okay at the national level, but it's not really cutting edge. Some of the stuff that we did in the LCDS was perhaps a little bit better, saying you need to prioritise maintenance on particularly high corridor cycling routes. There's still a little bit iffy about the pedestrian side of things and the maintenance of that. At the kind of local level, maintenance with an enormous asset backlog. No one's really thinking about maintaining footways. It's all about carriageways, particularly across most of the places in London, I will say. Perhaps the City of London will lead the way on that score. How are you doing? So anyway, if you go through those 12 steps, it's quite a useful way. Are you just happy? Are you sad? Are you indifferent? Do you need to do some work? But for me, you've got to have all those 12 in place to create the conditions and the culture for a walking and cycling environment to actually take place.